A fellow traveler. The Bible has different words for depression, such as sad, discouraged, and miserable. Its effects are different for everyone, and it's hard to describe the feeling of unease. It can stem from negative circumstances, but sometimes the cause is difficult to pinpoint. One of my biggest challenges in battling depression is the isolation. When the walls started to close in, I would just stay away from people. It got to the point where I was aware that what I was doing wasn't good and began to pray about it as much as possible, which isn't easy to do because I was either lost in my thoughts or sleeping. But within those dark moments, I would cry out. I started hanging scriptures around, and seeing it gave me hope, and I realized that God was walking with me in my darkness. We need to learn to lean on God's grace, His Word, prayer, and support from fellow Christians who help us to remember Romans 8. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. We are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. Romans 8:37. Nothing whatsoever can separate us from the love of God. Romans 8:35. You see, depression doesn't discriminate. Even in biblical times, whether rich or poor, people were overwhelmed by sadness and despair. And as humans, it's normal to be depressed or discouraged after a loss or a traumatic event. And God never punishes for sadness or grief. He is our loving Father. He comforts and understands. And we must remember that we can't base life on our emotions. The Bible teaches in Philippians 4:1 and James 1:2 that we should think about the situation as a place where we can have joy. And it seems more realistic to me to trust what God says than what I feel at that moment. And He encourages us to call upon Him in our darkest hours. The joy of salvation comes from constantly realizing that our sins are forgiven and that we will live forever with God.